endless times from pundits like myself and others, is that if Syria were to go, it could create that exactly that earthquake that Bashar al-Assad is talking about throughout the region, across a region that includes Iraq, Lebanon, Israel, Jordan, Iran. I mean, very volatile, and Syria having extremely complicated, intimate ties with various groups. We have the Hamas group, obviously, in Gaza. We have Hezbollah in Lebanon, seen as proxies for Syria, and by extension, Iran. Iran and Syria very closely linked. Assad knows this. Assad knows that when he evokes the earthquake terminology, he speaks of dividing a fire across the Middle East. He knows that is exactly what the West wants to avoid. And as you mentioned earlier, the NATO Secretary General making very clear Syria is not Libya. There is absolutely no possibility of a Western-led military intervention of any kind right now in Syria. So Assad is reading the West's mind very well and playing on those fears.
Now, like you say, unlikely that there'll be anything from the outside, but inside there have been many defections, army defections. How much has this really weakened President Assad's position, his grip on power? Yeah,
the number of defections is still, the verdict's out. I mean, you know, some people say as high as 15,000. The actual number is probably smaller. But what it is you have had officers breaking off from the main army and often either hiding out with their families or in small villages, or in some cases actually fleeing across the border to Turkey. Turkey, a former ally of Syria, has now gone very much in the other direction and is allowing itself to essentially play host to what's called the Free Syrian Army. It's a merger of these rebel groups. They are essentially commanders who are giving orders to field units in Syria. Like I said, still very small, but if more of this were to happen, more fractures, that could pose quite a dilemma down the road for Assad. He still has a firm grip on power. He still has the security services behind him. He still has the middle and upper middle class behind him, the merchant class behind him. If those people were to go, if the economy were to grow weaker, that's where we really could see the divide. It hasn't happened yet, but with each day that passes and that this repression continues, a lot of people think that his grip will weaken.
Thank you very much, Douglas Herbert, for that look at the situation in Syria in Top Story. Moving on now, it's the first day of a new era in post-war Libya, one without support from NATO. The new leaders had asked the military alliance to extend its mission, but it stuck to the plan and yesterday ended the mission that helped topple Muammar Gaddafi. Coinciding with this, a new prime minister was elected by members of the National Transitional Council. And we can get more on this from Nick Mio, who joins me now from Tripoli. Good morning, Nick. Now, Abdul Rahim Al-Kib is an academic and a businessman from Tripoli. He's seen as a man of consensus. What more can you tell us about this little-known candidate for the premiership and his main challenges ahead?
Well, Libyans don't know much more than that, really. He's not a well-known figure. He's emerged as a consensus candidate. There's clearly been a lot of arguing behind the scenes. Forming a government's taken a long time. So you've got a man who spent a long time in the United States. He's a professor. He's a bit of an unknown quantity, and he has a massive task ahead of him. He has the job of disarming the militias, he has the job of reconstruction, and of course there's Libya's first proper democratic elections as well to organise.
Like you say, of course, amongst his challenges, taking on the security situation, and the UN Security Council has expressed concern over the massive weapons stockpile built up in Libya under Gaddafi. What are the new leaders saying they're going to do about this?
Well, they say that they're going to get these weapons under control, but they have masses and masses of challenges. Large areas of Libya aren't really under the control of the National Transitional Council, especially in the south and along the borders. And there's a great fear that these weapons can be smuggled out of Libya. They include very dangerous weapons like anti-aircraft missiles, shoulder-launched anti-aircraft missiles. Intelligence experts know that Al-Qaeda wants to get its hands on those. There are chemical weapons still from Gaddafi's stockpiles in Libya. They have to be secured and made safe. And there are thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands, I suppose, of rockets and machine guns as well, all over Libya in warehouses. So it's a huge job, and it's causing real concern to diplomats and intelligence experts. This mass of weapons, how are they going to be secured and brought under control?
Thank you very much, Nick Mio, reporting from Tripoli. Now, Palestinians are celebrating UNESCO's decision to grant them full membership. Out of more than 170 countries taking part in Monday's vote, only 14 voted against. But among the few opponents, the US. And it says the decision is regrettable and premature. And it's putting its money where its mouth is, or not, rather.
Member of UNESCO.
Palestine had scarcely begun celebrating its admission as UNESCO's newest member before the US responded with punitive measures, a halt to its funding of the UN Cultural Agency.
Today's vote by the member states of UNESCO to admit Palestine as a member is regrettable, premature, and undermines our shared goal of a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in the Middle East.
The US was on the verge of making a $60 million payment to UNESCO in November. It's cancelling the contribution, the vast majority of its annual payment of $80 million. According to UNESCO, the US contribution amounts to 22% of its budget. The move is a big blow to the agency.
This step could have potential implications for the funding. We will need to work on practical solutions to preserve UNESCO's financial resources.
UNESCO, or the UN Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, became the first such agency to welcome the Palestinians as a full member since President Mahmoud Abbas applied for membership of the UN in September. The US threatened to veto the Palestinian bid in a Security Council vote, but it has no such power in UNESCO. Becoming a member of the agency is a diplomatic victory for the Palestinians, who continue to seek full state membership at the United Nations.
A massive drug ring has been dismantled in the US state of Arizona. These just some of the guns and bundles of marijuana seized in that operation. Officials say this all came from Mexico, and more than 70 people have been arrested over the last few weeks.
Our investigation has revealed that the organization was smuggling more than $33 million of drugs a month into Arizona. And yes, that is per month, primarily through Arizona's West Desert. The bulk of the drugs smuggled by this organization were marijuana, but we have also seized significant quantities of cocaine and heroin during the course of our investigation. We believe that this organization, which is tied to the Sinaloan cartel, has been in existence for at least 5 years in our state. During that time, we estimate that the organization has smuggled more than 3.3 million pounds of drugs into our country, generating nearly $2 billion in illicit proceeds.
Moving on now to what Herman Cain is calling a witch hunt. The US Republican presidential hopeful has carried on campaigning as normal after denying allegations of sexual harassment against him. They date back from the 1990s.
It has the makings of a scandal, but could it be enough to derail Herman Cain's campaign to become the Republican presidential nominee? Politico.com reported that while the pizza magnate was head of the National Restaurant Association in the 1990s, at least 2 women accused him of sexual harassment. He has strongly denied the women's allegations.
I have never sexually harassed anyone, and those accusations are totally false.
Cain questioned the timing of the revelation.
I told you this bullseye on my back has gotten bigger. I have no idea. We have no idea the source of this witch hunt, which is really what it is.
A political outsider who's never held elected office, Cain seemed to come from nowhere to challenge the Republican frontrunners. He shook up the campaign with his so-called 999 tax plan that would scrap all existing taxes in favour of a flat 9% rate for income, sales and corporate taxes. The proposal has helped catapult him into the top 3 alongside Mitt Romney and Rick Perry. But the campaign is still in its early days. Analysts say the harassment allegations could be damaging.
Our voters are still learning about Herman Cain. Most people have not yet tuned into the presidential race. So this is the first big story that they will have heard about Cain. And if it's the one that sticks, that's going to be really difficult for him to shake.
Politico reported that the women received 5-figure settlements. Cain first said he was unaware of any payments that might have been made by the Restaurant Association, but later said one employee received a termination settlement.
In Pakistan, 3 militants were killed in a US drone strike on Monday. This the latest in a series of strikes in North Waziristan, a tribal region, as you can see there, near the Afghan border. Many lives have been claimed in those attacks over the years, and some locals have had enough, saying that too often the victims are civilians. And for several days now, protests have been held in Islamabad. Noémie Lawler and Olivier Joly report.
These tribal leaders have traveled to the capital from northern Waziristan to speak out against U.S. drone attacks on their villages.
This assembly of elders is showing the whole world and human rights organizations how cruel these drones are. And we, the people of North Waziristan, we're here to denounce these strikes in the strongest possible way.
These tribal chiefs say U.S. drone attacks are killing civilians and are here to garner international support against the strikes. Herman Cain's son and brother died in a 2009 airstrike.
It will be better if the American forces and NATO attacked us directly, face to face. But that will never happen, because they are striking at us from the sky and they live far away.
Cain hired a lawyer and joined up with a British NGO. Their goal, to go after the CIA for drone strikes in Pakistan. But it's an upward battle against the U.S., who refuses to discuss the drone attacks publicly. Most of the airstrikes target zones off limits to journalists, leaving it up to locals to provide evidence.
I hope that the people who are going to get us the evidence we need to prove the cases that we're going to bring.
Evidence like these photos on display in Islamabad and missile debris with identification numbers.
Moving on now to another milestone in China's burgeoning space program, the launch of the unmanned Shenzhou 8 craft just a few hours ago. The aim is to dock with the Tiangong-1 lab, which has been orbiting the Earth for a few weeks now. It'll be a couple of days, though, before it can try to do this. If or when it does, it'll be the first time China has joined 2 space vehicles together, and that would take the country one step closer to its goal of building a space station by 2020. That's it for our news roundup. Let's now, though, remind you of our top news stories here on France 24. Shock and disbelief as Greece announces a referendum on the new aid deal. No date has been set, but this is already further unsettling the markets. A Tripoli academic and business